Today is Sunday, February 25th, 2024, and I'm here with Reverend Dr. Mendle Adams, and I'm Vicki Werneke for another episode of Mendle's Musings. Well, Dad, it's been, I think, about a month since we did our last recording, just because life got in the way for both of us. But
you've improved over the month, and I've deteriorated.
Deteriorated? You're not allowed to deteriorate.
I'm really an old man.
Yes, you are an old man, but you're not an old fart.
I'm wearing a pair of socks that Charlene gave me for Valentine's Day that says, I love you over the moon and back.
Oh, that's nice.
And I wore them to church this morning.
Yeah.
And during prayers, while they were asking for the prayers of the people, I had my legs crossed, as I usually do, and a woman sitting behind me poked me in the shoulder and says, I love your sock.
That's sweet. That's sweet. That's very nice. Very nice. So, Dad, you were saying before we started recording that today, or at least right now, you want to talk about how you've been touched by grace. I think it's how you, and how you are, even though you've been a very successful in your endeavors, that, as you know, I would also, in my own life, we are not an island to ourselves, but have a lot of people that help us along the way. So, and that's what you want to talk about, right?
When you talk about me being a success, it reminded me of something that Professor Charles Ashenden, who was a patristics professor at the Christian Theological Seminary, told me one time. He said, Mendle, or Mr. Adams, he says, you are a solid B student, which sometimes has flashes of genius. And I was offended.
Oh, no. That was a compliment. You know, when I was in law school, the joke was the A students become judges, the B students become partners, and the C students become the real lawyers, which is what I was the middle road. Because in the end, we all get called lawyer and we graduate.
And the D students are like what's his name from Ohio that become representatives.
Yes, exactly.
They can't pass the bars exams.
Exactly.
Anyhow, I thought in terms of epochs in my life, and I know that I forget a lot of them, but I know there were people in my life as a youngster that that showed interest in me. Uh, I had a first, second grade teacher that I just absolutely adored. Her name was Miss Peters. And I just absolutely adored her. I thought she was one of the most beautiful women I'd ever seen. And and she showed some interest in me, but it wasn't until I got in the fifth grade, because my fourth grade was a disaster. I had a really bad teacher. And that's when they had two grades in one room.
Oh, no.
They had the A grade and the B grade, and so you had that going on. And uh, Ms. Johnson was really a bad teacher, and treated me very disrespectfully. Introduced me to my uh, teacher for the next class for the fifth grade as her A number one pest. And Ms. Johnson did that at a basketball game in front of my mother, and my mother was really, really angry with her for doing it.
Yeah.
What she didn't know is that my father and Miss Barber's husband were good friends, and that Les Barber had in his basement he had uh, uh, lathe,
Oh,
and he had done some work for my dad on his shop, and dad had hired Les to do some work, and so they were colleagues in some sense.
hmm.
So she didn't realize that, and Miss Barber had a baby, and when I went with Dad while he and Les were together, she would let me play with the baby, and I was only in the fourth grade, and so I felt really honored that she would do that, and she made learning exciting for me, and was able to get me to read. And Mother bought me some books. I don't know if Mother had talked to her or what, but Mother bought some old Hardy Boys books and stuff like that for me to read, and I spent a lot of time reading.
Were
Uh,
you not able to read after fourth grade, or not read as well?
Sorry,
Were you not able to read after fourth grade, or just not able to read as well? I mean,
I didn't have books in my home.
oh,
That's
oh,
what I meant. I was able to read, but
okay.
I didn't I didn't read. I read in order to get in order to do the lessons
I mean,
and that kind of stuff, but then put it away and went home
right.
and did something else. But in this case, it was reading for the sake of reading itself. I learned to read.
Oh,
I learned
interesting.
to enjoy reading, and I still enjoy reading. I
That's
thoroughly enjoy
interesting because
reading.
I mean, I've always seen you reading. I mean,
Yeah,
you've instilled that in me, and I've instilled that. Peter's the only one that kind of picked it up, but that's interesting that you.
that's part of, and so I see it in some sense that Miss Barber that was an act of grace for her to reach out to me. In other words, I was a number one A pest of the one teacher, and then the next teacher showed me some respect as a person,
Right.
and uh, and I saw her as doing that to other people. I didn't see myself as a teacher's pet. I
Mhm.
did see myself as someone that was respected as a person in my own right, was able to think and able to talk and able to, you know, to do the lessons and so forth. So that was something that that I felt very strongly about. Then I was also thinking about how uh, in my puberty, uh, my parents were excited about the fact that I had discovered masturbation, and so they were angry about that. Not angry, but they were concerned about it,
Appalled, right?
and so they whisked me off to Bible school, and of course nobody did that there. Um,
That's when you got
and
shipped off to Franklin Pilgrim,
Frankfurt,
Frankfurt.
Frankfurt Pilgrim College Bible School.
Oh my
The
God.
Bible school was recognized by the state, and I went there for half of my freshman year. Wait a minute, no, for all my freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, and then I told my parents that if they sent me back, I would run away, and so they didn't. So they let me stay home and graduate with my class.
Mhm.
What has taken me to be an old man to understand is that is what the school, Richmond High School, um, a dean whose name was Kuhn, Kuhn. I don't know his first name, but Mr. Kuhn. He went to bat for me so that they gave me credit for those classes that I took at Frankfurt, even though Vicki,
They
it
were.
was not really a it was not really academically sound at all. It was really, really bad. Uncle Paul can verify that because
I
he
remember,
went
yeah, I
to Harvard.
remember you guys talking about that before.
He
Yeah.
left in the for his junior year. He and Ruth went to high school for the junior and senior year. I stayed another year, and I just said I am not going to come back to this. This is
Hmm.
just toxic, and I'm not going to do it. So, but but Mr. Kuhn went to bat with the folks so that they gave me credit for the classes. So you had classes in Bible. He said, okay, that's literature, stuff like that. See, so he would
Good.
give me credit for that. So I didn't have to make up a lot of classes.
Wow.
And they put me on a track. It was not an academic track in high school. I wanted to get in debate, and they wouldn't let me in debate.
Oh,
I wanted to get in choir, and they wouldn't let me in choir.
really?
Um, I it, it, and I took general math, did not take any higher math at all. So I was on this non-academic uh,
Just so you could
stuff,
graduate.
and I had been told in junior high school that there was no reason for me to take academic subjects anyhow because I never go to college. And they were making assumptions about that. I said when I got my second master's that I thought about looking up the counselor and spitting in her ear. Uh, isn't that awful?
That is
Uh,
really
but
right.
but the facts of the matter were that someone went to bat for me,
Right.
and I wasn't aware of that. And there was a puzzling thing that happened. There was a walkout at the school my senior year. The students walked out because a coach had been fired. I don't know why he was fired, but he was fired. And Alan Carmen, my good buddy since kindergarten, said, "Come on, Mendel, let's go." And so we walked out together, and at least 75% of the student body walked
Oh
out
my
of school,
gosh.
stood out on the parking lot, and Mr. Coon saw me in the hallway and said, "Mendel, after all I've done for you," and I had no clue what he'd done for me. I can reflect back on it now and know what he's done for me. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was an act of grace. He didn't have to do that.
Right.
They they could have justified saying, "Look, the family screwed this kid's life up, and so it's on them." And instead, he let me graduate with my class.
So did you not go out to the parking lot, or did you go to the
No,
park?
he was gone by the time I was aware.
No, I mean when you did the walk. So you did the walkout, even
Yeah,
though yeah, because you didn't realize.
I
Wow.
was walking out because Alan Carmen is going out
Right.
because it was the thing to do. I wanted to be part of the group.
Right. Right.
And Mr. Coon stopped me in the hall and said, "Mendel, after all I've done for you," and I thought, "What have you done for me?"
Wow.
And I went ahead and walked out anyway.
Yeah.
And I've felt badly about that because I know that he did some extraordinary things. He pulled some strings to get me to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because
And
otherwise you would have had to go another year, maybe.
yes, yeah, I would have had to take
Graduate, and
remedial math
then yeah,
and and
English,
real English literature,
right?
and I would have had to take those classes, and they didn't make me take them.
Isn't that amazing?
So
Mm,
I was thinking about that. That was an act of grace in my life that I was unaware of.
yep.
I have a certificate hanging on the wall of my office when I was 15 years of age, where the little Pilgrim Holiness Church there in Richmond, Indiana, issued me a preacher's license. I was 15 years old.
Wow. 70
15
years
years old, and they that was that was an extraordinary um, act of grace.
ago. Mm-hmm.
Now I don't know. I don't know what went on to that. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
who who suggested it. I don't know if it was my mom and dad. They might have. Uh, uh, they never said that to me.
Would
It
they have
might have
even,
been.
would they have
Go
even,
ahead.
I mean, would grandma and grandpa have even thought to say, you know, give them a license to preach? I mean, they don't strike me as people that would be that forward thinking, you know?
Grandma determined that I was going to be a song evangelist, and that my second cousin, uh, Johnny Hensley, was going to be uh, a preacher. Well, Johnny didn't want anything to do with that, and but Granny thought I was going to be a song evangelist because I like to sing.
Right, right. I can see that.
And there was a guy in the church whose name was Paul Crick, played the guitar, not well, but he played the guitar. He knew some chords and played. And Alan Carmen and I sang a song one Sunday morning. We sang Whispering Hope,
Ooh.
and it was so soft that no one could hear us. The
You didn't have microphones?
people couldn't hear what we were saying.
You were whispering the song, huh?
I think Alan played the ukulele while we sang it. That's right. And Whispering Hope was on the uh, jukeboxes and so forth then. And so that's what we sang. But Paul took me under wing,
Mm,
and he'd have me come up and sing with him while he played the guitar, and he and I would sing. And he encouraged me to use my voice.
nice, nice.
So that was an act of grace. It really was.
Yep.
Um, and I think that maybe that helped to prepare the groundwork for, but that had to have a vote from the church council.
Oh,
And Lord, I'm telling you, boy, you had to pledge that you would walk the straight and narrow and so forth. And, and I dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's, and I crossed some T's that were I's that should have been dotted. And, so they gave me a license to preach. Vicky, that's 70 years ago. That was an act of grace.
yeah, yeah. I mean, did they
Um,
do that very often to give license to people that young, or did,
yeah, yes, they did. If people came and they showed some promise of leadership, pulpit leadership, they would license them to preach. They did, but it was usually
oh, okay.
older men that we get that. Now women were also allowed to get licensed to preach, but there were very few that did
Oh,
in the congregation, but
yeah.
they were also allowed to do that.
Interesting.
And
Did you get
so
paid for preaching when you were that young?
no, oh no,
Okay.
no,
Yeah.
no. You paid for the privilege of preaching.
Did you have to pay to get the certificate?
No,
Oh,
no.
okay. Okay.
But it was a nice thing, and I see the signature on that. Floyd Goins was the district superintendent that signed that. Years later, when I was 20 years of age and I took my first church in Windfall, Indiana, it was Floyd Goins' father that started that church 20 years before I went there.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so
There you go.
that
Yep.
he started that church in a town that was a camp for German war prisoners that were kept in Indiana, Windfall, Indiana, and they were locked up there. And so there was a lot of stories that came from that.
I think I found some newspaper articles about that. I think,
Yes,
yeah,
yeah, you did. Yeah, you did some.
yeah.
So I see those as acts of grace. And then and then I took some classes after your mother Ruth and I were married. Uh, it was pretty well set that what I was going to do was I would be active in the church and preach the, fill the pulpit when it was needed as a lay preacher and so forth, and be an accountant, if you can believe that. That was my goal. And I took a job as a bookkeeper at the national headquarters of the Pilgrim Holiness Church in R.A. Beltz's office, and he gave me a job. I was married at age 19, and R.A. Belts was one of the preachers because of his friendship with your Grandpa Williams. And
Oh,
since it was his daughter that was getting married, Grandpa Williams asked him to preside. And so
uh-huh.
there were two preachers, Reverend Belts and Reverend Wolf, that married us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I applied. I found out they needed a bookkeeper. The old woman had been there since Noah got off the boat, and she finally expired, and so they needed someone to take her job. And so I applied for the job, and RA hired me. And my sister Marlene said, "What do you know about bookkeeping? You don't know anything about bookkeeping." I said, "I know that debits have to equal the credits, and that's all you have to know." I had that down
There
cold.
you
I knew that.
go.
I did. I did go to night school and uh, borrowed some money from the Pilgrim Holiness Church to pay my tuition to go to night school, and studied bookkeeping and general office stuff and so forth at Porter Business College in Indianapolis, Indiana, down on the circle, and had to walk home, a long distance walk home. When the weather was bad, I rode the bus, and I did that. But RA hired me and then allowed me to borrow that money. My dad had to co-sign for me to borrow the money, which is an interesting thing with my employer.
Yeah,
And so I was there, and so that was kind of an act of grace. You see what I'm saying? That
yeah,
with
yeah,
there. So then your mother and I, she was encouraging me to go and get more schooling. So we went to back to Frankfurt Pilgrim College, and I took 1 year at Frankfurt Pilgrim College at the college level. That was Bible school college level.
oh, oh,
Again, that is not a good school.
right,
You understand what I'm saying here?
yes,
It's really bad. So I was pastoring that little church in Windfall, Indiana, after we left there, and uh, decided to go to Marion College. Now, Marion College was a denominational school for the Wesleyan Methodist Church. And the Wesleyan Methodist Church was negotiating with the Pilgrim Holiness Church about merging.
oh,
And the college at Marion was not accredited. It was a non accredited school, but was moving toward accreditation.
okay,
In that year that I had, they had agreed that the Pilgrim Holiness and the Wesleyan Methodists would merge, and that the Wesleyan Methodist schools would honor the work that was done at the Pilgrim Holiness Bible School and give them credit. So, Vicki, they gave me credit for the classes I had.
wow,
and then they got North Central accreditation, so I have accredited classes that I'd taken. So that's an act of grace. You see what I'm
Yeah.
saying? That
Yeah.
happened. I got under the wire. I didn't have to go back and take other classes. Now, as it turned out, I was so turned on by what I was learning at Marion that I took everything they would offer, and I took more classes than I would have to take. I took a full load every every semester. I took a full load,
'Cause you were
and
just
so
so starving for
oh yeah,
knowledge, and I can just
oh yeah.
imagine. Yeah.
And so it was an act of grace that I got in under the wire. And I've told David about some of the things that he has. He only has my son David, your brother David,
Mm,
only has one class that he has to do to finish his AB,
right.
and he just won't do it.
Yeah.
And it's too late now, probably. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't, the
Uh,
school that he went to is no longer in existence. And
is
yeah,
Temple is no longer in existence?
the Brainerd Indian
Oh,
School is no
Brainerd.
longer in
Oh.
existence. And so
That's too bad.
anyhow,
Well,
but I saw that as an act of grace. Go ahead. I'm
I
sorry.
was going to say, I just wanted to kind of go back a little bit because you
I'm
said
rambling.
when you were no, you're going in chronological order, but I want to get some clarification. You said when you were going to that Porter Business School in
Yes.
Indianapolis,
Yeah.
you guys were living in Windfall then, or you said you had to
No,
walk.
that was. I'm trying to. That was before Windfall.
Okay, so where were you living? Were you living near Indianapolis?
Yes.
Okay, okay. I was thinking,
We
oh my God, Dad, you had to like walk.
we lived we lived in a house trailer for a while.
Okay,
Uh, and then uh, we lived in a. I'm trying to play that back. We lived in a house trailer while I was going to classes at Frankfurt Pilgrim College.
okay,
Then I moved to take the job from there. I moved to take the job at the Pilgrim Holders headquarters, and we moved the trailer there, and we at first lived next to the church with a hookup that they had next to the church, and then we moved it to a trailer court, and then uh, JC and Lola bought a house that was across the street from the church where we were, and I was minister of music,
right.
choir director, and I couldn't read music.
And Mom would help you. I remember you talking about that before.
We coded in colored pencils to tell me how to lead it, and that was an act of grace. They hired me, and I didn't know how to read music for crying out loud. But you're
But you
gonna
sang beautifully. You sing beautifully.
very well. You can do it. I played the old bass.
So-
I didn't know how to play that either. Uh, but but
Interesting. Okay.
that the timeline is getting confused in my feeble brain right now.
No,
But
no.
that happened.
So
But
then,
there were
so you graduate from Marion College,
yes,
and I remember, wasn't that like in 1967?
yes, it was.
Because I was 4 years old when you graduated,
That's correct.
and then what made you? When did you go to seminary? Then did you already decide you were
Immediately,
immediately?
immediately. Yeah. Uh, and and during that time, when I was going to Marion College, uh, the Methodist minister there in town was talking with me, and and convinced me that I ought to go to seminary. Well, he was a Asbury graduate, and I knew I didn't want to go to Asbury because it was so conservative, and I knew even at that point that I was not. That wasn't where I
Going
wanted
down
to
a
be.
different path than that.
And
Yeah.
I was pastoring a Pilgrim Holiness Church in this little town. but Asbury was too
Too
conservative for
conservative.
me. And so anyhow, Kenny Fall introduced me to his district superintendent. And it just so happened that my job that I've been living at was at the Mitchell Farms hybrid seed corn plant. And uh, Merle Voorhees, who was one of the co-owners of Mitchell Farms, happened to be my boss, and he happened to be one of the leaders in the Methodist Church in the conference. And so he gave me a warm encouragement to come to the Methodist Church, and they introduced me to the superintendent, and the superintendent gave his approval for the bishop to appoint me to that little church, and they they agreed to it.
They love you.
The first uh, the first Sunday, one of the guys came out and said, "Well, that wasn't bad at all." And I went home and I said, "Did they expect me to foam at the mouth? What were they expecting?" Now, Vicky, I had started studying the book of Philemon, a
Oh,
very short book in the New Testament, and supposedly written by Paul. Probably wasn't, but it was supposedly written by Paul. And I had done as written out a series of about 4 sermons based upon the book of Philemon. Well, the Philemon is only like one chapter long, or maybe 2 chapters.
right.
And so, after the third Sunday in my series, the president of the council said, Mendel, uh, you do realize that there's more than one book in the Bible, don't you? And after I'd been there for 4 years and was going off to seminary, that rascal, you know what they gave me for a going away gift?
What?
The Interpreter's Bible, the volume on Philemon.
Oh,
But
that's
they were so gracious, and they were so
yeah.
they had a lot of grace about putting up with a lot of my idiosyncratic ways and so forth. And I had to be re I had to learn a lot of stuff, not only at the college, but the congregation had to teach me a lot of stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
they did. They
Mm.
did. And so I have a great respect and regard for the Methodist Church, and that's one of the reasons why I have some personal angst about the struggle they're going through right now,
Yes.
because I have a
It's just
deep,
sad.
deep regard for them.
Yeah.
So when I went to seminary, I had some works of grace there as well, because I took a 2-year class to get my Master of Arts in Religion. And then the idea was I'd take that, and then I'd go another year to get my Master of Divinity. And I got ordained deacon in the Methodist Church based upon the fact that I graduated with the MAR.
Oh,
It was after I had gotten ordained and so forth that Grandma and Grandpa became dependent upon me. Grandma and Grandpa Williams became dependent upon me. We had to make a
right.
place for them, and I had to find a way to make more money.
Right.
And so I left the pasture, and uh, when I eventually got, you know the story, but when I eventually got in, we're leaving some stuff behind, but I was hired to go back to Marion at the First Methodist Church to work with their youth department as a
Yes.
part-time minister with youth.
while you were still, while you and mom were
I'm
still
still
selling
selling
insurance.
insurance. Yes.
Right.
And
That's how we
so
ended
I
up
did
back at
that.
Marion,
I
right?
did that, but I had just I knew here what I needed to be doing,
So
and
I've always wondered, what happened with that, you being the youth minister at first? Because I know by the time I was in the youth group, you were no longer, and you and mom even stopped coming to church a lot.
yes, yes, that was a dark time. Uh, I don't know if you remember Bob Glass?
Yes, yeah.
Bob Glass was associate minister there. Phil Stevens was the senior minister, and Bob was the community organizer. He
Okay,
had all kinds of stuff going. He had a thing going for young women who got pregnant during the school year could finish their high school because he had retired teachers that still had their certificates to come to church and meet with them and take them through the classes that they had to have and and made it possible for them to graduate even though the high school would kick them out because they were pregnant.
pregnant, yeah.
And that was one of the things. Another thing was a daycare center. And one of the things they did, they opened that up to the migrant community. So they brought kids that were otherwise left to fend for themselves in the migrant camp. They would pick them up and bring them into the church and, give them cookies and Jesus and Kool-Aid and take care of them and that there were just a number of things like that. And the youth ministry grew out of his idea. He called me, Bob called me and said, man, on the day that the kids were shot at Kent State,
Oh,
he called me and said, and I was feeling awful about
yeah.
that. And he called me and said, "Would you be willing to come and take a position on our staff as a minister with youth?" And I said, "I'll talk with Ruth about it." And I talked with Ruth, and I said, "I really feel like that's what I ought to do." And she said, "Let's do it." So we did, and
Oh,
that's when we
wow.
left to do it. And
I didn't realize
so
that.
I was there because of Bob Glass and because they were very active, and we had a civil rights program going, and we had all kinds of stuff going with the youth. I don't know if you remember the warehouse that we had.
I do remember the warehouse. Yeah.
Kids that came in and played their music,
Electric
and
aardvark.
the Electric Aardvark was a little shop that sold, they called a head shop, but we
Right.
didn't sell anything that had to do with drugs, but we did sell posters and incense and
Lava
stuff
lamps.
like that. And so we were hippie wannabes, and I also um, uh, did some counseling with people that were trying to avoid the draft and talk to them about how to do that. And that was during the Vietnam War. I mean, there was
Right.
stuff. We did a radio program that was done over the local radio station. All that stuff was going on, and our senior pastor got someone that paid for him to take a trip to the USSR, and he went to the USSR on this group. And when he came back, he told the congregation about how he stood up on the bus and led people saying, "God bless America," while they were going across Red Square. Okay, give you some idea. Well, then he announced uh, at the board meeting, he announced that he was sacking Bob Glass and said we can no longer afford the luxury of an outreach ministry. And that Sunday morning following that, Phil said to me, he said, "Well, I hope you'll stay with me." And I said, "I've known Bob Glass for a lot longer than I know you, and I am out of here." And I left.
Oh.
And that's what had caused it. And then they changed pastors, and they got Don Barnes, and he was better, but it just never quite worked.
And then there was Terry Jones.
Terry Jones was
He was
on staff.
He was the youth minister when I
he
was there.
was supposed to do the work that I was doing. He got involved with the Jesus freak
Yeah,
phenomena where they were smoking marijuana and reading the scripture.
he
And
was a little freaky, but
he was very freaky.
he's the one that I went through confirmation with. But then Jim Hale, or is it Jim Hale?
Max Hale.
Max Hale ended up being there, and I remember was he like the associate minister?
Yes.
And I
He
think
was
something
he
happened.
was associate minister,
I think
and
Terry.
Max was a great guy.
Oh my gosh, I just have very fond memories of Max.
The
And
last time I saw Max, he and his wife Maureen were annuitant visitors for the UCC, and Charlene and I were annuitant visitors,
yes,
and we were at this national meeting in Milwaukee,
I remember
and they
you.
were having communion. And as it worked out, he and I came to take communion at the same time. And I said, Max Hale, and I gave him a great big hug. And you know what? The first thing he said to me, he
What?
said, "How's Vicki?"
Oh, he was. I mean, I remember. So I remember something about Terry ended up getting booted. Even
Yes.
I don't know if it was after my confirmation. I remember it was sixth grade,
Yeah, I think it was after.
and but I remember Max was then the youth director after
Right. And,
that.
and,
Yeah,
and then
but I wasn't
Max
there much longer.
Max then went to the UCC and became a UCC minister in Topeka.
But
And so when I went to McPherson,
I remember
I
that.
contacted him and he preached at my installation that
I
Sunday.
remember that. But the weird thing is, because we were only there in Marion for like maybe another year, because we moved away when I was 13. So
Wow.
I mean, it was very short time frame. But yeah, I have very,
Yeah.
and I don't remember a lot of specific about Max, but I just remember him making me feel very,
He was a good man,
yeah, yeah.
good man. And he and I got to be just dear colleagues.
So that's another, act of grace too, right? Yeah, that's the interaction. Uh-oh, you froze. Did I use? Ah, you froze. Oh, hey, you froze. You ran out of juice. Well, I think we're through. We've been talking about 45 minutes, so I think that, no, that's okay. That's so funny. That's so funny. Okay. We did cover a lot of ground. Yes, we did. It's kind of a fun way to end the musings for today.
What's going? It just went blank.
Well, you froze. I'm like, oh my gosh, did he lose internet connection?
Okay.
All right.
All right, sweetheart.
We'll try to do this again next Sunday.
Okay. Bye-bye. I love you.
I love you too. Bye.
Bye.